Howdy folks, we're looking at Edge Magazine issue 22, which features the M2 on the cover. Released in, I believe, July 1995, yeah, that's what it says, and discussing the future of interactive entertainment. Well, the M2 would never come to be, but let's take a look inside what it's all about. So, the inside column shows the first image we see of the Nintendo 64 and its design. And the column laments the lack of success the Super Nintendo had, saying, yeah, it had a lot of great release titles like F-Zero and Pilot Wings, the Super Mario World, and I remember games like ActRaiser also coming out soon after that. Super Pro Protector, also known as Contra 3. And then Edge is like, yeah, but third-party support wasn't that strong. Well, and then they mentioned games like Street Fighter 2 and Bomberman and Secret of Mana. I'm like, yeah, Super Nintendo got a lot of good third-party support. Square, Capcom, Konami, all the big companies made games for Super Nintendo. So I don't know what they're talking about. And in the end saying, the death knell for the SNES rings in the era of publishers and retailers. Does Nintendo deign to give the world Donkey Kong Country 2 and Killer Instinct? The SNES deserved better. I don't know why Edge is so negative about the Super Nintendo. Okay, so RPGs in Japan, M2, Virtual Boy. I don't know this fellow. I think he works for 3DO. We'll see him at the end. Okay, so the Ultra 64, aka Nintendo 64, was going to be released a bit later, unfortunately. So, that's some bad news. Rare would, however, make a lot of great games for the Nintendo 64, as we all know, including Blast Corps, right? Remember that game? And Jet Force Gemini? Yeah, Virtual Boy will be released soon. I don't know if there's anything interesting about the Virtual Boy mentioned in this article. They have a tracked mode again. We hadn't seen that for a while. And this is full throttle for the computer. Apparently it has a very interesting opening scene. I don't recall it being that interesting. The Saturn seems to be selling better than the PlayStation the first couple of months in Japan. But that wouldn't last that long. Yeah, of course, the M2 getting closer to reality. I sometimes wonder, maybe Trip Hawkins paid Edge to talk about M2 every month so that publishers, developers would be hype about the console. I mean, none of the other magazines talked that much about M2. I mean, I did read about it a little bit. Virtual reality coming to the Jaguar, maybe not, but this picture I've seen quite a lot. This fellow. This one I've also seen around a little bit. Can I get a better image? Thank you. With the freaky 2 red lights. But here's the newest version, which I've never seen anywhere else. And of course, I don't think it was ever released. Lockheed Martin getting interested in computer technology, 3D graphics. Well, Lockheed Martin is an evil company making missiles and the like, but apparently they've also helped... Excuse me. Ooh. They've also helped us enjoy computer games. Didn't know that. I wonder where that ended up going. So the Commodore brand has been bought by SCOM apparently, but still I haven't heard anything more about them since the mid-90s. So I don't think that went very well. You can buy Silicon Graphics workstations in the advertisement. I haven't heard much about them either since the mid-90s. So this is not for the CD32. This is just some setup so you can play games on your computer. The letters. I read them last night, but geez, sometimes I think I should just read these right before I start filming. Let's see. Anything worth mentioning? Somebody's disappointed in the Saturn version of Daytona USA, and rightfully so. Another person thinking that the PC would be the end all when it comes to video gaming, but there's of course the price. Oh yeah, and there's a pretty good letter here about how the prices of cartridges might not be that such a bad idea. And I don't think that Nintendo 64 lost to the PlayStation because of cartridges being too expensive. I think that the PlayStation did a very smart move on making their games very easy to copy. Now, we don't like talking about this, but the PlayStation, at least among my friends, was a very cheap console to have because it was, you could get a lot of free games by copying them. The Commodore 64 did something like that too. Nintendo was always wary of that, so they stuck to cartridges. But this letter is more about how the CD drive in a PlayStation, would add an extra $30 or maybe even more expensive, and then you would also have the PlayStation would also be more expensive because of the extra RAM needed in the console, which I think was at 3 MB. Correct me if I'm wrong. So even though the Nintendo 64, I think had 4 MB. But you also had to buy a memory card for the PlayStation. So maybe cartridges were a good another way of keeping the prices all right. And I hated the loading times on the PlayStation. I've always preferred cartridges. And I don't recall the Nintendo 64 games being all that more expensive than PlayStation titles, unless you were copying them. Alright, so on to the preview section. Bullfrog being shown again, this time with more fantastic games. Syndicate Wars for the PlayStation 1. I don't recall if that was as popular as the original. I'm sure it plays just as well, but didn't make much of a splash. What did make a splash was Theme Hospital. So they made Theme Park, and now they're doing a similar thing with hospitals. And this game, Dungeon Keeper. So, let's get rid of that glare. These some early pictures. The finished game would look quite different if you ask me. So those are two big games coming for the PC in the late 90s. And some submarine game. Here's Syndicate Wars again. I never liked the original Syndicate. I thought it was a bit too slow. And Myst. I don't know about this game. I don't know if it had ever been released. And there's also Biosphere. So Bullfrog making lots of games. I'm surprised that they only spent 4 pages with Bullfrog, because it's one of the Edge's favorite companies to check out. It's a very odd commercial for the 3DO. When you were younger, your biggest turn-on was followed by a month of worry. Now you know better. Is it like, now that you're older, you could spend more money on a console or something? I don't know. Here's an article about linking up a PlayStation so you can play games against each other, as you see in Demolition Derby. I've never done this, to be honest, even though I think it's a pretty good idea. And other racing games like Wipeout. So, Metal Jacket, the Mech Warrior game. So yeah, you could do that, but in practicality, we always wanted to play the same game on one television. Oh yeah, Grand Chaser. I forgot to look this game up. So this seems to be a Saturn answer to Wipeout. If I can look at these images, it looks futuristic and fast. I don't recall if this game was a success. Hopefully we get a review later on. But it has been forgotten. Wipeout was also released for the Saturn, so maybe Grand Chaser never got any attention because of that. Terminal Velocity. This was a fairly popular shooting game, which is kind of like a flight. It was like a flight shooting game, and from what I recall, it was pretty fast. So fantastic graphics for the time. But it didn't get that much attention because there was Quake and Duke Nukem 3D, which we see here. Yes, the Duke returning, and this was at the time easily the best shooting game. I believe it was released slightly earlier than Quake. It had very colorful worlds. The first level was designed very well. Lots of different weapons, but most of all just an awesome atmosphere. Oh yes, and playing against each other was a lot of fun. You could jump, and the levels I played in multiplayer seemed to be more 3D than those of Doom, even though it wasn't true 3D. Yeah, you could move your mouse around and shoot. That was something that was new to me at the time. Shinobi finally coming to the Saturn, and this was not a good game. Now, I've always found the Shinobi series a bit overrated. I've always found the character to move a bit stiff. You were either throwing shurikens, which felt safe, or you were struggling with the sword play and the jump kick and all that. I always preferred Ninja Gaiden, which felt much quicker, and I felt more in control of my character. So I've never played this version of the game, but it didn't get good reviews, so it didn't bother. And after that, I don't think we ever saw another good Shinobi 2D game. I think the series peaked with Part 3, which Edge never reviewed. Okay, so some flight games for the 32-bit systems. First of all, Ace Combat, a series that continues to persist, even though, I don't know, I guess people just buy it because they want to play right in airplanes. It's by Namco. Wing Arms, though, I've never heard of. It's for the Saturn. Looks fantastic. Again, Ace Combat also looks really good. I hope this gets reviewed later on, so I have an idea how good it is. Okay, one more thing to do. Let's look at this article. Now, none of the RPGs... No, I'm incorrect. I played this one. But most of the RPGs he mentioned, I don't even know. I mean, I recall these games being mentioned earlier, but never playing them, like Ark the Lad. And we see here Wise and, or East, I don't know how you pronounce it, and Zelda 3. And Edge is acting like, yeah, it's a different culture, it's a different world. We see Ringlord Saga, I don't know that game either. Well, Sega Densetsu 3. I'm not a big fan of the game because I find the combat very wonky. It just kind of happens by itself, and I didn't care much for the different story paths. It looks beautiful, but if I just want to play a nice action RPG, I always preferred the original Secret of Mana. 3DO has a micro cabin game of sorts. Maybe you can recognize it. I can't. And there's Secret of Evermore, one of my personal favorite games. I'd love to tell you more, but actually, you know, we're going to stop this now. Yeah, so, and we'll continue talking about Secret of Mana 3 and Secret of Evermore and the other RPGs. See you then.